Hi, my name is Christina Seston. Welcome to The Truth About Hypertension. Hypertension is a very dangerous disease with fatal consequences. This show contains important information for those people with hypertension and those who are concerned about hypertension. My guest today on the show is Dr. Young-Soo Kim. Dr. Kim has been a regular guest on this series of shows with me. Dr. Kim is from MIT, and he operates one of the most successful biomedical companies in North America. Welcome, Dr. Kim.
Thank you.
So I understand, Dr. Kim, that the last show we did together, The Truth About Diabetes, has been an incredible success. So congratulations again.
Thanks to you. I think it was quite timely. The diabetes was becoming a global epidemic, and it was quite timely that we did that educational program.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I understand it's been broadcast in China. Is that correct?
A few times over the national TV
Excellent.
network and translated into a few countries' languages.
Wonderful. That's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so today, Dr. Kim, you're back to talk about another very serious disease.
Hypertension.
Hypertension.
High blood pressure.
Yeah. So can you tell us just a little bit about the dangers of hypertension?
It's more prevalent than diabetes.
So more common.
Yeah, just in the States, 50 million people have it. But 30% of them are undiagnosed. So it's quite prevalent and dangerous disease.
Right, and so that's quite a high number, 30% undiagnosed. Why? Why are they undiagnosed?
Because it doesn't have a symptom unless it becomes really, really serious. Yeah, people say some stiff neck and a certain pattern of headache, but other than that, there are no symptoms.
So there's not much to go on.
Yeah, and then the blood pressure changes hour to hour, and it changes depending on mood.
Right.
So
it's hard to get a reading. It's hard to get a fix.
That's correct. And so there are so many undiagnosed people.
Right, right. So, Dr. Kim, why is hypertension or high blood pressure, why is it so bad?
Because when there is a high blood pressure in blood vessel, the blood vessel itself becomes thicker and stiff. So blood vessel itself, the pipe loses elasticity.
Right.
And then it's a matter of time that rupture happens here and there.
Right.
Also, the hardening of artery, arteriosclerosis. And then once this happens, bad cholesterols and fats get accumulated in the pipe.
Right, so there's less, it's more constricted, less flow.
That's correct. And then therefore, sometimes it blocks the supply of oxygen to key organs like heart.
The heart, yeah.
And then once there is an insufficient supply of oxygen, the muscles of heart grows thicker.
Right.
And it gets damaged permanently.
Right.
Then it's a matter of time that a person has a heart attack. Yeah.
Right.
It's very serious. And stroke.
Right. Stroke is an important concern as well.
Basically, heart failure is the #1 cause of death in America.
Right. Yes.
And stroke is #3.
Right.
And it is known that 13% of all deaths globally happens due to hypertension.
13% of all deaths globally are
happens
somehow connected with hypertension.
Yeah, directly connected.
Directly connected.
Yeah. So it's the #1 killer.
Right.
And then other diseases such as kidney failure, 25% of all kidney failure comes from hypertension.
So that's extremely high.
This is #1 killer.
Yeah. So, Dr. Kim, traditional treatments, how do we normally approach something like hypertension?
Basically, once you are diagnosed, doctors tell you that you have to be on this prescription drug for the rest of your life.
Wow.
And then there are a few varieties of this prescription drug. And then, for example, diuretics, which is basically stimulation of urination.
Right.
So the liquid of the body just is lessened.
Right.
Yeah. And then we have beta blockers.
Heard of beta blockers.
Yeah. And then we have vasodilators.
Vasodilators?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's not worry about these
Okay.
technical terms.
Right.
Yeah. But there are a few varieties of this.
So these are classes of pharmaceutical drugs.
Yeah, it comes under different brand names.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then they usually recommend those pharmaceutical drugs, and they usually recommend low sodium diets.
Right. Right. So you said that you're on these drugs forever.
That's what they recommend.
That must be extremely frustrating to hear
That's
as a
correct.
patient who's diagnosed with hypertension.
That's correct.
Now, what about increasing the dosages? Is that
It
something that
happens. It
happens over
happens,
time?
Yeah, they usually increase the dosage and in variety. So at first, patients have one drug only, and then two drugs, three drugs. But problem is that all these drugs are quite bad in side effects.
Right. And
Yeah.
I would think if you're talking about drugs for the rest of your life and a combination of drugs that you're now talking about, there's a lot of expense involved with that.
Yeah, and then usually hypertension patients use other drugs too.
Right.
So they have to buy all other drugs. But problem, more serious problem with these hypertensive drugs are, their side effects are quite
Right.
serious.
So let's talk about that. I've got a list of side effects here in front of me. So it sounds like there's quite a range. So starting at the sort of less serious end, what are some of the side effects associated?
Some less serious side effect I can mention hair growth.
Hair growth.
Yeah, so hair growth, for people like me, it may be a good news, but problem with the hair growth with hypertension drug is the hair grows in not so desirable places, arms, chest, back, face.
Right.
So
Cosmetically,
cosmetically, it's
not
not
too
really
appealing.
Yeah. So anyhow, that's one of the not so serious side effects of these drugs.
Right.
But there are many other
More
serious
serious.
side effects, yes.
Right. So I have down here that you can feel weak and dizzy on these drugs, fainting spells,
Poor circulation,
poor circulation, gout,
gout.
breathing difficulties.
For breathing difficulties, this is fatal, sometimes fatal for asthma patients.
It must absolutely create such a negative
So
situation.
you should be really careful. Once a person has an hypertension and asthma together, you should be really careful.
Right, right, absolutely. So I also see increased risk of heart attack, palpitation,
Yes.
tremors,
Yeah.
damage to liver and kidneys,
Yeah.
and sexual dysfunction.
Sexual dysfunction due to this hypertension drug is very serious. So a person has hypertension for a while,
Right.
and diabetes, which is very common. And then if they use hypertensive drugs, most of them, almost 100% of them
100%.
have sexual dysfunction. Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so bringing something like Viagra into the mix,
Even worse.
even worse.
Yeah.
Right. So it sounds, Dr. Kim, when you list all those side effects, it makes me wonder if the benefits are outweighing the side effects or vice versa.
Yeah, that's the consensus of this medical circle. The most patients stay hypertensive even with these drugs, and then the long-term benefit is a lot less and fewer than this side effect.
So they remain hypertensive even after they're on these prescription drugs.
That's correct.
And in the long run, it sounds like the side effects outweigh the benefits.
And then what makes the situation even worse is recently we found that the many hypertension drug causes and triggers diabetes. So then these drugs actually are found to be the causes of diabetes.
So some of these, you're telling me some of these prescription drugs are actually causing diabetes?
Yes, and then or makes the diabetes treatment very difficult.
Sounds like it absolutely creates chaos.
Yeah, so of those classes of drugs we mentioned, especially diuretics and beta blockers, those two are very, very dangerous drugs for diabetes patients, or they cause diabetes. So they are very bad.
Absolutely. And I've also heard that if you're taking other different types of medications for, say, arthritis, that taking hypertension medication can create some serious problems.
Hypertension drugs are known to have many adverse interactions with the other drugs.
Right.
Yeah, and then it increases the toxicity of other drugs too.
Right. Penicillin.
Yeah.
Penicillin and
such antibiotics.
antibiotics.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So hypertension drugs, doctors are not happy to prescribe.
Right. So Dr. Kim, I mean, this all sounds extremely bleak for someone who's just been diagnosed with hypertension.
That's correct, but today I came here to share with you some great news. There are new discoveries, especially in the area of natural treatment. There are some great discoveries. That's why I came here. I'm very happy to be here today.
Good. So Dr. Kim, why don't we take a short break, and when we come back, why don't we talk about some of those new natural methods that you want to talk about with us. Thanks. Welcome back. Dr. Kim, before the break, we were talking about some of the natural remedies that you're here to talk to us about. But I think before we get into that, what exactly is hypertension?
High blood pressure, basically. But every living organism has its ability to maintain or restore its balances. So our body has an inherent ability to restore balance. If blood pressure goes too high, it
Right.
brings it down.
Regulates
It goes down, it
Brings
brings
it
it up.
Right.
But for hypertensive patients, they lost this ability. That's why they're in trouble.
So their body cannot regulate the pressure.
And then at first it progresses very slowly, then it speeds up.
Right. And so before the break, when we were talking about the prescription drugs, and we were getting into some of the side effects.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And some of the things you were saying is that there's a really quite a short-term relief from these pharmaceutical drugs.
That's correct. Only temporary relief.
Right.
In exchange for permanent dependence.
Right. That was the point I wanted to make. Sounds like there's dependency on these drugs. The body becomes dependent.
Body's ability, inherent ability,
Right.
To restore its own balance becomes weaker and weaker.
Right.
So they depend upon these chemicals. For example, I mentioned that there is a certain chemical the body releases to relaxes its blood vessels. And then if we use these hypertensive drugs
Right.
to relax these blood vessels,
Right.
and body takes it as a signal that
It doesn't need to do it.
Yeah, so that part of the function is become lazy, and at some point it stops functioning.
Right.
Then that person has to take that drug
Right.
permanently.
Right. So would it be true to say then that just more and more drugs are required to do the same thing?
Yeah, so more dosages,
Right.
and then even more varieties.
Right.
So that's the fate of these hypertensive patients
Right.
who begin to use these drugs.
And so on the other hand, when we talk about natural remedies, how are those working on hypertension?
That's the beauty of this natural treatment. Natural treatment is not only good for this symptom treatment, but it restores the body's own ability. So it's the opposite of these chemical drugs.
Right.
So if you choose this natural treatment correctly, the body's own ability to restore its balance, which you call homeostasis.
Homeostasis, right.
Yeah. So it's restored. That's the beauty of this natural treatment.
And it sounds too, like just on the topic of natural remedies, that it sounds like Western medicine is more open and accepting of this now.
Before, up until 10 years ago,
Right.
herbal medicine was treated like superstition.
Right.
But now, after lots of researches are done, now established medical circle also accept it.
So let's talk about some of the natural remedies that you're here to share with us. Where do you want to start?
Let me at first share with you what is called LBM treatment.
LBM treatment.
Yeah, it used to be the Indian treatment, but it became very popular in Tibet.
In Tibet.
And then about 30 years ago, it was taken up by Chinese scientists. These days, Western scientists also joined the bandwagon. And then LBM treatment is herbal treatment.
Right.
Very safe. It is known to cleanse the blood vessel. So it helps the...
So it cleans like cholesterol?
Yeah, it is helpful for arteriosclerosis
Right,
patients.
which is the hardening of arteries.
Yeah, and then it is also known to stop the aging process too. It's a beautiful treatment.
Stopping the aging process.
It's
That's
beautiful,
something
yeah.
I want to hear more about.
And then these days the Western scientists succeeded in isolating the active ingredients
Right,
of
right.
they identified the active ingredients of this LBM formula, which is quercetin.
Right.
Yeah, and then So they are starting the synthesizing these active ingredients chemically.
So they're interested in it.
Yeah, but I prefer the natural form rather than synthesized chemical form. Yeah.
Right, that makes sense. And so what would be another method, a natural method of treating hypertension?
I'd like to mention P700 hypertension formula.
So P700.
Yeah, and it was originally developed as a diabetes treatment by a Canadian university. But they found out that it not only reverses diabetes, but it also reverses hypertension.
So it works with both diseases.
Yeah. So they applied this knowledge to develop the hypertension formula per se.
Right.
So it's called P700
Right.
hypertension formula.
Right.
That's also very safe, very effective, and then it's a very well-known formula.
So how many people would be taking something like P700?
Yeah, 50,000 people.
So that's quite high numbers.
Yeah, and that is well accepted by the experts by many countries.
Wow,
Yeah.
that sounds really exciting. So are there any other natural formulas?
DASH is what I'd like to mention. DASH.
Dash.
Diet approach to stop hypertension.
Diet approach to stop hypertension.
DASH.
Right,
It's
so
called.
that's the
It's
acronym.
very famous. It is invented by Dr. Morse, who is a very prominent scientist, and then by 4 other medical doctors. In the beginning, nobody really believed their claims because they all thought that these claims is outrageous.
So what are the claims?
Within 14 days, without drugs, people become normal.
So 14 days, hypertension gone.
Yeah, without drugs.
How?
Basically by means of taking more high fiber,
Right.
and then more vegetables. But it's
So
amazing.
Is it substantiated?
Yeah, it not only substantiated these days, even American Heart Association
Which is a very credible organization.
officially endorses this treatment.
Wow.
And then National Institute of Health, NIH, financially supports this study.
So they believe in it.
And then New England Journal of Medicine carries not only one article, but series of articles
On this.
on this treatment. So it became an established fact.
So that sounds really positive.
That's so for hypertension, there are many news that brings us hope here.
Absolutely. That sounds like it. And by the way, what are the causes of hypertension?
There are many, not only one. Of course, the genes play some role. And then ethnic variations play some role too. For example, Afro-American male have such a higher incidence than the rest of the population.
Interesting.
Yeah, but the
Gender play a role at all?
Yeah, the before menopause, women seldom have hypertension.
Interesting.
Yeah, but the after menopause,
Post-menopause.
yeah, they virtually become the same.
Equal.
Yeah.
Right.
And then most important factor is lifestyle, such as eating habit.
Right.
And
Not enough vegetables, not enough fruit.
and lack of exercise.
Right. So our Western diet contributes.
Yeah, it's a Western lifestyle.
It's interesting, Dr. Kim, as you describe those causes of hypertension, because it sounds an awful lot like diabetes.
That's correct. Actually, these two diseases are so closely related. Some people say these two diseases come from the same root.
So diabetes and hypertension are that
Let
connected.
me give you a few statistics.
Yeah, that would be great.
75% of diabetic patients have hypertension.
Wow, that's high.
Yeah. And then 70% of diabetic patients eventually die of coronary diseases such as stroke and heart failure, which are direct consequences of hypertension.
Wow.
And then so people say it is inevitable for diabetic patients to become hypertensive, and vice versa. It is inevitable for hypertensive patients
to become diabetic.
Yeah. So these are two most deadly combination of diseases.
Absolutely. And Dr. Kim, do you remember in the other section of the show where you were talking about the side effects of the prescription drugs? One of the side effects was that it would actually cause or worsen diabetes from the drugs.
Yeah. For example, the diuretics. It removes the not only the potassium, which is a very important nutrient, but also it triggers the insulin resistance, which is the cause of this diabetes, right? And then another thing is that once you have an insulin resistance, it hardens the artery. And then also it makes the kidney more sensitive to sodium.
Right.
So it becomes more and more difficult to handle the sodium.
It sounds like a vicious cycle.
It just intensifies each other.
Right, right.
So the treatment of hypertension
Yeah.
worsens and aggravates the diabetes.
Right. When you say the treatment, you're talking about the